Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. Before we get started, I'd like to say if you're enjoying our videos, by all means, please subscribe. And when you do, don't forget to hit the little notification bell. If you tap on that little notification bell, you'll be notified every time we put up a new video. Okay, that's it. So for today being the kind of a strange day, this coronavirus thing is really, I think it's weirding everybody out. And I'm certainly no one to complain. I have no reason to complain. All I'm saying is this is very, very different than anything I'm used to, and I hope everyone is dealing with it as well as they can. It's a situation that, like I said, I've never seen anything like it, and I've been around a while. So by all means, let's get through it, and let's get through it together. For now, I think we might as well go play with motorcycles. Can't go anywhere, can't ride them anywhere, might as well play with them. Well, I've been asked several times about SU carburetors, and it just so happens I'm real fond of SU carburetors. With all the different kinds of carburetors, I usually use what I consider to be the best carburetor for what I'm doing, for what I'm building. And so on the knuckles and pans, as long as they're basically stock displacement, I like to use the old Linkert stock type carburetors. Makes them easy to start. They really work well. If I've got an electric start bike, personally, on the old ones like a Shovelhead, I really enjoy an SU on them. I've run all kinds of carburetors on all of them, and they've all been fun, some just more so than others. SUs make a tremendous amount of power. They're very efficient. The manner in which they work, I think, is in theory, I think they're a real good carburetor, and in practice, I think they're even better. Basically, they're a vacuum-operated carburetor. Now, they have a butterfly on the throttle side. This is the engine side. This is where it would bolt up to the intake manifold. Let's show the carburetor first. This is an SU prepared by by Rivera Engineering. This is an SU Eliminator 2. Again, here is the front of it, where the air cleaner bolts on. Here's the back of it, where it bolts onto the intake manifold. Now, a lot of people think these are really relics, and personally, I think they work so well. Again, they make an awful lot of power, and very nice, smooth power, and very good gas mileage. So I've had a lot of fun with these carburetors. So this is the one I run on my own road bike. I think it's the second one. One I wore out after a couple 100,000 miles, maybe 300,000 miles. I wore it out. I want to start making bushings to repair them, but I haven't done that yet. Which brings up one of the first things you want to check on these carburetors to see how good a shape they're in. It's just like on an old Linkert carburetor. You've got a throttle shaft. You want to shake that thing back and forth and see that it's tight in the body. If in fact it is, this unit's a good one. And this one certainly is. Getting back to the way it functions, when the throttle plate opens, that allows the engine to be pulling vacuum through the carburetor. So with the engine pulling vacuum through the carburetor, it causes this piston to lift. And when that piston lifts, then it brings up the tapered needle that's in there. And the higher that piston goes up, the larger this opening, and the more fuel will flow out of the main jet around the main needle. Now, these carburetors basically have only one circuit other than the, trying to think of what to call it. Okay. What do we call it? What do we call it? Come on. What's the word? It's not a choke, it's an enrichener. We have an enrichener on it. That's the word I was looking for. When do you get to be my age and just lose a word right out of the middle of nowhere? Anyway, so what we're going to do is clean this carburetor up, and I can show all the features of it as we go. Now this is normal maintenance anyway, is to pull the piston and the needle and clean it. Now the first thing we want to do is loosen this cap here on top. Haha. I already loosened it. Okay, so we'll take that off. Sometimes you have to take that off before you can get the carburetor off, or get the dome off the top here, because like I said, this is normal maintenance. I usually do this with the carburetor in place. I'll use a little stubby screwdriver to take this dome off of here. Okay. And I'm trying not to get my hands in front of the camera. Okay. So here we go. Now what I'm going to do is take the dome and the piston right off the top of the carburetor. This is the way you would do it on the motorcycle. Now see, you can get it and tilt it enough to get it out of there, because this thing's going to be right under the gas tank if you've got 5-gallon tanks. Okay, now we can set this aside, the whole body, and we'll get in here and we'll clean this out. This again is the dome. You can see in there, see what it's like. And we want to make sure it's clean in here. Okay, this is the piston. It also needs to be nice and clean. This is the needle. Now when you're tuning these, you can use a richer or leaner needle. This is something that people lose regularly. This is the original instructions that came with this carburetor. Now if we were tuning it right now, here's all the different needles listed. And the funny part of it is, you rarely have to change one unless you've really hopped it up. You find what you'll have is the standard needle, and then you can go to a little bit leaner needle or a little bit richer needle, just like changing the jet in another kind of carburetor. Now I used to show people in my shop, I always used to show people when they didn't understand how to get their SU carburetor tuned, I would go to this one paragraph and explain to them. If they read this one paragraph, they could probably put it right into tune. There's not much to it. It explains the difference in altitude and how to adjust that needle up and down, or the jet on it. We'll get to that in a minute. Right now, before we put that back together, let's have a look inside. I haven't done this in a while, but normal maintenance is just cleaning that dome and lubing it lightly. Back when they used these carburetors on European cars, they used to put oil into that dome, and we don't do that on a Harley. We do this exactly the way the manufacturer tells us to do it, specifically for a Harley. And I have run a lot of these carburetors. A lot of customers running them, and they're fun. Okay. I have the cameraman trying to tell me something. I can't for the life of me tell what. Yeah, these things sound a little bit, and some people don't like that. They'll actually make a little sound at idle. And I was going to get to that when I put the piston back in. But they just do it at idle. Some people say they sound like a sewing machine. When you get on them, they sound really nice. This is 1 3/4 for those of you who are used to metric numbers. That's about 44 millimeters. That's a big carburetor. Let's see, would that work? Yeah, actually. Setting the float level here is not too hard. And this one, let's see, I need to get a tape. Oh, I guess I can use this. There we go. It's fine. What we're doing is we're setting it straight across the float bowl to get the center of this float right about there. It just barely moves it. So we have the float level set properly. So I really don't see any reason to remove that float, although it's not difficult to remove. That screw right there is the float pin, and the float is right here. And there it is. There is also a needle in there, and like I said, it was working fine. Now there's an added thing on this particular carburetor, and that would be this little piece of tubing. That's added on to what they call the gross jet. And what that does is, please notice that this is that bottom plate that went on the bottom of the carburetor, and this section right in here is the extension, so we have an extended float bowl. And what that does is that pretty well doubles the amount of fuel that's in the float bowl. A lot of people will say, why in the world would you need that? Well, to be quite honest with you, I was in a race going into Kingman, Arizona, which is a big, long grade. And I was on my Shovelhead with this particular carburetor on it. And a friend of mine was on his Hot Rod Evo. And we raced up that long grade all the way into Kingman. I don't remember how many miles it was, but I told him by the time he got to the bowling alley, I'd be halfway through my first cup of coffee. And I was. And he could not figure out how my little Shovelhead had blown his Evo Dyna away. Pretty simple. I outfueled him. This thing will flow as much fuel as you need. With a nice big fuel line and a nice big petcock, this will deliver as much fuel as you will need. Ever. Now, they did make some of these carburetors in 2-inch versions. This is 1 3/4 inch. They did make some 2-inchers. They have not made them in years. If you have a really big inch motor, I think it'd be fun to have a 2-inch one of these. I've got a buddy who's got some brand new ones stashed somewhere, and I know it. So one of these days I'll go see him. But I don't have a big inch motor to run it on. Okay, and here we are. With the float chamber back together. Again, this is an extended float chamber. This was a special order piece that extended the float quite a bit. Why we had an extra long pickup for the fuel in there. Okay, so there's that. Now this, over on this side, we'll need a 5/8 wrench. This is the tickler. In other words, when we go to start this motor, we might give it a couple of squirts. And what that is a little pump on the side of the carburetor. And if I put my finger over the end of this push rod here, this push rod is actually operating as a vent for the float chamber. So if I put my finger on it, it's going to allow pressure to build up in there so that when I push that little pump, it's going to squirt fuel right up the center around that needle, and it primes the engine. So it's kind of a neat thing. So right now we're going to open this up, see what kind of shape it's in. It's been sitting there drying, so chances are, oh, it looks beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I think these are real pretty pieces anyway. That's a brass tickler. And you can see there's a gasket on here. I'm going to carefully put this right back into the tickler body. And you don't want to remove that body, the tickler body, from the carburetor body, because it's a press fit, and they're pressed in at the factory. You can see at one time I actually polished this thing. There it is. As soon as it gets a little gas in it, it'll get real nice and freely operate. Okay. Okay, so now we've checked the throttle plate, we checked the float level, we put the float bowl back together, and that's pretty much it, except for putting the dome and the piston back in place. Now first off, let's have a look at this piston. This is the needle right here that is mounted in there. And the way to remove that needle, we're not going to remove the needle. There's no reason to remove it. But there's the screw that holds it in. And this needle and this little bushing around the outside of it come out in one piece. And the way these needles differ is by their taper, their size. And this one tapers down. And if we were not getting enough fuel, if it was running too lean, we would actually get a skinnier needle so that it restricts this hole here in the main jet less. Okay, we're going to put this back in place carefully, slowly. Nah, not yet. I don't want to do it yet. What I want to do is they tell you to do a little WD-40 on this. Personally, I can use WD-40, or I can use little Marvel Mystery Oil is what I use this time. But you just want to keep a little oil on that. Okay. And then we'll put this back in. The needle goes into that hole. And the dome slides, or the piston slides right in. If we were doing it on the bike, we would slide this in as one piece. Now, it won't hurt to put a little bit of that Marvel Mystery Oil around the inside of this dome, too. There we go. Put that in there. And wipe it around. And then we'll take this, wipe it a little bit, make sure there's just a little bit in there. You don't want much more than just a little bit. And there's the spring. Now the spring can be changed too. And all of that is explained in the instructions. Okay, now we got a bump right here. And when you install that on there we go, onto the carburetor facing me here, you put your finger inside and you get that needle where it has to go. Carefully. There it goes. And the dome is in place. All we need to do now is pick up the screws and put it in place. Now, when you're installing one of these carburetors, see, this one was running just fine, so I don't really want to take it apart a whole lot. But we'll go over it anyway. There's not much to adjusting one of these at all, because you're only running on one circuit again. You do have an enriching circuit, but that's all. Other than that, it's just a single circuit carburetor. Makes it pretty easy to tune. And the way you enrichen or lean it is by raising or lowering the needle. Now you've seen the needle as it comes out of the bottom of the dome. But how in the world would you raise and lower it? Well, you don't. You raise and lower the jet that it goes through. So you start with that jet completely flush with the bottom of the carburetor body, and then you raise and lower it accordingly. And the way you richen it is by turning this screw in, which will in fact richen it up a little, or out to lean it a little bit. And all it does is raise and lower that jet on that needle. So it's a real easy thing to do. I find when I'm going like through the Colorado Rockies, every time I stop for gas going up the mountain, I'll lean it about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. Just lean it a little bit. And then I stop for gas the next time and I'll lean it a little more. Then when I'm coming down after I've gone over Loveland Pass at about, 14,000 feet, then I'm richening it up a little bit at a time as I come down the mountain. Now, a lot of people say, that's a lot of trouble. I'd just rather have fuel injection. I don't know. I just feel close to my motorcycle and thoroughly enjoy doing these things. But we've got it back together now. A lot of people would ask, how in the world would I start with that adjustment? It's real easy. You bottom that screw, you turn it out 6 full turns, and you're in the neutral position. 2 full turns in either direction, and you'll have to change needles, and that'll be your indicator. All of this stuff is very clearly spelled out in the instructions, and it really works well. So I hope that helps people as far as SU carburetors are concerned. I've been asked a number of times about them, and I felt like it was time to show one. So we did. And now that's ready to go back on my road bike. As soon as I put the rest of it together, I'll put that carburetor back on it. Okay, I think that finishes that. I got a feeling I'm going to get a few questions in the comment section on that, and if so, that's fine. But don't insult them. They're really nice carburetors. Okay, so now we're at that part of our video where I should come up with something new for the project here. Project bike, still gathering parts. I really wanted to take this front end out to the shop that's going to straighten it. But we got interrupted and said, hey, you can't go anywhere, so I didn't go anywhere. Okay, so that's okay. So I went through the parts room and I dug out this brake. Looks like a pretty nice backing plate, and I remember using this brake at one time. Seems to me this brake was a pretty good one. So here's the backing plate. It looks like the shoes were on it pretty good. That even looks like some original lining on original old shoes. I like that. And this is the drum, which looks like it's seen better days. But the sprocket is real nice, and the drum is relatively attractive. So what I'm going to do is probably have it turned. And I've got a whole bunch of ideas to do on some of these old mechanical brakes. And so on this bike, I'm going to try to do them. And every one of them that works, I'm going to be sure and show so that everybody that wants to do that can benefit from them. Anyway, that's it for now. Stay home, be good to yourself, enjoy each other. It's a bit of a rough time, but hey, it could be a lot worse. So thanks for stopping by, and as soon as they let me, I'll see you out on the road.